Blake, which member of your family are you most like?
Toby, everyone in my family just tries to be more like me.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who definitely doesn't need more humility, and I'm here with my co-host, who is the one who taught me this ridiculous amount of confidence, Toby Walters.
I do have a very hard time believing that everybody in your family is trying to be like you.
Toby, they all want to have a job that's not a job for a living. I mean, are you kidding me?
Well, they do want to work at Church Gear. I get that.
My mom literally asked me if she could pack boxes here one time, and I was like, Mom, you cannot work at Church Gear.
My kids started today at Church Gear. It was very fun. Like, they were back in the shipping department, just learning to pack and ship boxes, and they had a big smile on their face.
If I was Chris, I would blame every shipping mistake on them.
I would do that too. I mean, I do it at home, so it would translate here. So, Blake, I do have a family member that I would say I'm most like, and it is my Uncle Ron, who is the youngest brother of my dad. So my dad was one of 4 brothers, and Ron was his younger brother, the youngest. Now, I am the youngest. Ron was the youngest. Ron was the only one that kind of like moved away from the family and pursued his own desire in ministry. So he went and he became a pastor, and then he ended up working for Salem Broadcasting, is a Christian radio network. They have Christian radio stations all over the country, and so he's worked with them for a long time. But he's a little bit the black sheep of the family. And as you can imagine, I'm definitely not the black sheep of my family.
The one that went into ministry is the black sheep in the family. What does that say about this family?
So Uncle Ron has his role was pastor liaison for the Salem Broadcasting Network. So he would go to churches and he would have a relationship, just, interface with their pastor between the radio network and the church. And so he knew, like, for decades, all the biggest pastors of the biggest churches in America. Like, they were his good friends, and he would see them at events. He would see them in their churches. Like, he would just hang out with these pastors. And so the first time I ever heard of Jack Graham at Prestonwood was from my Uncle Ron, because Jack is a friend of his.
No way.
Yeah. So it's fun for me to actually get to talk to Pastor Graham, and then view it a little bit through the lens of Uncle Ron, who paved the way a little bit. So do you have anybody in your family that kind of paved the way for you, or are you doing that now for future generations, Blake?
Toby, I'll have to tell you off air that there is a great joke about my lineage where we've all survived by being really good at, how do I say this politically correctly? Faking our way through it. Literally, my grandfather survived World War II because he was so hysterical. They didn't want him to die, so they kept him on supply runs so he could entertain the generals at night.
Yeah.
And that's my lineage right there.
And I do feel like talking with Pastor Graham is kind of like talking with that wise person, where it's comforting, and you want to sit there and just say, you just tell me more. Like, just those stories are so comforting.
It's like the fire crackling. You just got your dessert. You're sitting with Grandpa by the fireplace.
Yeah, and just soaking in that wisdom.
Wisdom. All right, hey, speaking of wisdom, let's go get some, because me and Toby ain't got none for you. Let's hear our episode with them on the podcast.
Introducing from Prestonwood Baptist Church, the director of media, who says he will also accept the title of media czar, Bryan Bailey, and senior pastor, who said he will also accept the title of senior pastor, Jack Graham.
Very nice. Yeah. And Bryan can wear that well, the media czar title. He can do that very well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Bryan, I think you just got permission to change that on your, do you have like a little plaque on your door at the church?
Yeah. I'm going to get the business cards updated immediately.
Perfect.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, Pastor Graham, thank you so much for joining us. This is really exciting to, talk about Prestonwood. You guys do so much around production and events, and you are very much viewed from the outside world as, kind of a moniker of what, to follow and, kind of riff off of. So
an example, a role model.
That's good words, Blake. Thank you. So we're excited to talk about that. We do a little game at first, and so we're going to spring this on you a bit. This is 5 truths and a lie, but these are from Mr. Bailey next to you. So we're going to read these that Brian gave us, and you have to decide which one of these is not true.
About what? About me? About the church? About anything?
About
Production stuff.
Perhaps bad things that Brian and the production team have done.
I have very limited knowledge.
Oh, you'll know these
coming in. All right, true or not true? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, there's only one supposedly that's not true.
False,
unless Brian's been lying.
I'm supposed to say true or false.
We'll read
through all 5 of them, and then you'll decide which one was not true.
Okay.
So here they are. First, one time the cross fell off the front of the pulpit, and Brian had to glue it back on without anybody noticing. Next, there was a sermon where pastor's tie was crooked, but we had to use the sermon for a TV show, so the editor had to rotoscope the tie back to look straight. Next, years ago, we had an operator error that caused the lights in the room to black out briefly during the sermon, but we blamed it on the power company. Next, we nicknamed the stage audio monitors that cover the pulpit area Pastor Blasters. And finally, the alternative name for our media team softball team was the Golden Grams, but they decided to go with Batmen instead. So there are your options. Does one of those jump out at you as not being true?
They all sound untrue to me. There's not one thing said there from if Brian Bailey gave you those truism or non-truisms. I don't. So to me, they all sound untrue. But I would say, I don't know. Let's go with the crooked tie. Maybe that's untrue.
Okay.
No?
Blake, you and I get to guess. Do you have a guess as what's not true?
Yes, I'm going to say it was not the power company, like as the blame, because I don't think Brian would ever blame the power company.
And I'm going to say they did not nickname the softball team the Golden Grams.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Okay, Brian. It's time to fess up.
I did get it.
You got it.
Oh,
it was the tie.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. We're not going to put that kind of effort into fixing things.
I was just thinking.
Now I rarely wear a tie. So it was only me and Joel Osteen who were the last standing with a tie, and so now I'm half in, half out on the ties these days. I still like them. They bring a little color.
Yeah.
Did we not send you the writer for this podcast that require ties for this level of
you
seriousness?
Guys are certainly dressed up. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, guys, either one of you can kind of give us a little background on your current auditorium at Prestonwood. When was it built? What are a couple of the major technological upgrades and like timing of that? And, some churches are now regretting having an auditorium that big, but, is it still very much serving your community and being a blessing for you guys?
Okay, I'll start and I'll let you talk about the upgrades. So we relocated the church from North Dallas to this location in Plano, Texas, in 1999. Our first service. So that's 25 years ago. We just, in fact, celebrated 25 years, our silver anniversary, if you will, here at this location. And we thought long and hard about what size room to build back in the 90s when we were looking at this. We visited some of the biggest worship buildings in the country at that time to just see what that felt like, what it looked like. We landed on 7,000 seats, pews. So, when you break it down into actual seats, when we do, for example, ticketed events and so on, it's more like 65, something like that. We know you can get 7,000 in it because we've done it. The fire marshal showed up and didn't like it when we had 8,000 people in there one time. But nevertheless, for the most part, we do not need 14,000 seats in 2 services. And we do have multiple services. And we have these seats for all kinds of services. For example, Prestonwood Espanol, which meets on Sunday afternoons at 2:00, typically a couple of thousand people. We previously had Saturday night services in there, 1,500 or so, 1,000 sometimes. So I give you those numbers to say we built a room that is easily adaptive to a full house or a smaller house. Mm-hmm. So you've got a lower bowl, you've got a terrace level, and then you got an upper balcony and a lower balcony. So it works for the most part, even with a smaller group, is what I'm getting at. And as to the question as to whether we would do it again, I doubt churches are going to build 7,000 seats in the foreseeable future, or 5,000, even 6,000. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the optimal number would be for a church of thousands of people. Clearly, many churches are opting for multiple services in a smaller room. That's where we are now in church life and really church history. But I do think there's always a place for what you might call a fountainhead church in the community that is a large, I don't like the term mega church, by the way, because it puts the focus on the size and not the ministry. If you're talking about mega ministry of the church, I like that.
Yeah.
But, or mega mission, but just one of these large churches like Prestonwood and others, I do think there's a place now and in the future for big buildings like this, whatever that number ends up being. And we're even thinking when we build another facility at our North Campus. Our North Campus now, we have around 2,000 people right at 2,000, there. That is really a hybrid kind of building, but eventually
we're busting at the seams there.
Yeah, we're in 3 services, and so will we plan on building a large building there? We have a lot of acreage, 120 acres or so. So the idea is that one day, at the right time, we would build a great facility there that would house, I don't know what the right number is, but probably around 3,500. I think is a good number. But that's just a guess.
Yeah.
So I doubt we would do this. First of all, this would be hard to afford. I mean, to build a building of this size now.
Yeah.
God gave us favor. We were at the right time, the right place, right economy to do this when we did it in the late 90s. So I hope that answers your question. But the upgrades, we did design it so that it would be conducive to big events as well as worship services.
And that's the thing for us is, we knew coming into which, by the way, I was in high school when we started the building program, and I grew up here at Prestonwood and got to be here for the first services and that sort of thing. We knew that because of the Christmas show we do and all the other things, we needed a venue that could accommodate those things. So a lot of churches, depending on what their DNA is, they're going to form it around just the Sunday experience. We formed and will continue to make decisions based on everything that we do.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge when we talk about the upgrades that we did is when you have a large room the size of ours, nothing is easy, nothing is cheap, nothing is simple. Like it's that size room means that everything is multiplied.
Yeah.
So whether it's video, lighting, the stage, audio system, you're not just buying 4 or 5 of something, you're buying 50 of something to make that work. And you're having to buy the highest power versions and all of that. So the larger room is certainly a commitment and an investment. But what was exciting about coming in and doing kind of redesigning parts of the room was to take the things that we've learned over the past 25 years and figure out how to improve what the space feels like. So when we did the scenic stuff with the stage, we also added elements along the side walls so that when the room's not completely full, it still has a boundary to it, and it kind of pulls the room in a little bit. It feels a little more intimate, as intimate as a 7,000 seat room can be.
Yeah.
The video system, same thing, being able to get better angles to be able to, the room is not, we don't operate in darkness on Sunday morning for worship. We don't turn the house lights out, and so you can't see cameras or anything. We keep the lights up, and I'm sure that's something that we'll probably talk about here in a minute. But because of that, we have to be cognizant of not making the room feel like a television studio. So the new cameras that we went to, while they're very technologically advanced, they're also very hard to see. So that helps things out quite a bit. The audio system, getting even coverage of the space. I mean, from day one, audio has been a challenge in that room. It's a very voluminous space. So the new system that we have in there accomplishes that. We've Mike Smith, who you guys have talked to previously on a podcast, for the first time, maybe ever, has actually had people coming up after the service, shaking his hand, thanking him for what the room sounds like. And that's just unheard of, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, and I was thinking also, one of the reasons that this building is still effective, as big as it is for us, is the external focus of our church.
Yeah.
To take the message to the world. And PowerPoint Ministries is our radio and television, internet ministry. And so now, and then with the online. So for people to view this room as a testimony, if you will, to the glory of God, the greatness of God, just the massive impact of this church and our community and beyond. We had Prestonwood Espanole's 15th anniversary yesterday, and it was amazing. We had an incredible room filled with a service. It was one of the best services I've ever been in, and the exuberance, the life, the enthusiasm.
It was cool.
Espanol, all in Spanish. We have a wonderful pastor, Gilberto Corredera. But I turned to someone sitting next to me, and because they have a very strong online presence, Espanol does. And I said, can you imagine someone in Venezuela turning this on and seeing this wonderful room and the people here in our country, in America, and friends? We have 20 countries represented from Latin America in our services. I mean, to me, it's just all glory to God. We have to overcome the size of our room. People drive by here and think it's an arena and say,
Sure.
oh, that's, you shouldn't build a building that big, or whatever people's opinions.
Yeah.
But it's what happens in that room that changes everything for people.
Absolutely.
I was just talking to a lady who came here from Chicago alone by herself. Her parents suggested she come to Prestonwood. She walked in not knowing a soul. We have section leaders, host leaders, that are to be prayer warriors in every section across the room. And she was just moments ago telling me that she knew immediately she was in the church that was going to be her home, because even though she was in this big place, the people just embraced her in her section. So
Love that.
and media enhances that, of course, whether it is lighting and the atmosphere, or obviously the sound. And that's always, the biggest challenge that we've had, I would say, over the years.
Yeah, Pastor Graham, I wanted to ask.
How frustrating it is if you've got this incredible building and you spent all this money and people can't hear you.
Yeah.
And so that's a big challenge, but so important. Yeah.
I wanted to ask Pastor Graham, kind of what is your approach to production and the feel and the senses of the room? Like, are you more hands off? It's not really your thing? Or are you very much a visionary kind of leader where you have an opinion on how it looks and how it feels in the room, how it sounds? How involved are you with those conversations?
Well, I think Brian would tell you, I mean, I'm not in his face a lot about this kind of stuff. I'm not interfering with their, work and ministry. We're very excited about what they do, but I do have opinions about that I do express, especially, back in, I guess, the 90s, we were having all these worship wars, choirs and new music and all of that. And now I think what's going on in churches in terms of conflict in many ways now is the lighting situation. Yeah. And, the new breed of pastors and church leaders, I think, have, their opinion is that the room should be dark and I know why they think this way. So, but we won't get into that. But my opinion is the opposite of that the room should be filled with light. And not only spiritually, we are the children of light, but just in terms of sheer communication, that the room should be bright. Maybe it's a better word than light. I want the room to speak of life. and light produces life. And then I have another opinion about the stage and who's on the platform, that if you turn the room completely dark and you only focus on what's on the stage, to me, although I'm certain that worship leaders and others don't plan it for this reason, but it appears to be more performance. They want to, they want to get away from performing. But to me, the church is congregational, and there's a time to bring the lights down and to have a focus on prayer, a focus on quietness before the Lord. But my view of the worship service that it ought to be an atmosphere that is inviting and engaging and welcoming. And if you're doing that, you're turning on the lights. And if you want to go to a dark restaurant where you can't read the menu, that's on you. But I think that it's not just because I'm old and can't read anymore, the menu, but I read it pretty good. I got 20/20, I have my eyes fixed. But I just, if you turn out the lights, and it's not a hobby horse I ride, but back to your question, I think Brian knows, but frankly, there are so few mistakes that are made. Back in the day, maybe I noticed mistakes a little more, whether video, not getting the words on the screen, or sound issues. We just don't have a lot. I would say the media leadership, they're sort of like the offensive line in football. Nobody ever notices them till they get a yellow flag, then they get a penalty flag, and then
and everybody hates them.
But we're doing a good job in trying to find the balance between on the sound, what's too much, what's not enough, and so on.
And a huge part of this is just communication, as you guys know, I'm sure. But like one of our and this comes from pastor, and it comes, it's in our internal discussions. We don't want to surprise anybody, and we especially don't want to surprise the pastor. So if we're going to try something, if something's going to be different, which good grief, the past year, as we did all these upgrades, almost every Sunday, something's different. So my goal is always to make sure that he knew ahead of time, hey, this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to sound like, so that he could prepare for that and not be surprised when he gets up, because his job on Sundays is to let the Holy Spirit speak through him and get the word out to all these people. Our goal is to be as non-distracting as we possibly can for him and also for the people in the room. Lighting is kind of my main background. So I worked at Prestonwood previously back in 2004 through 6, and I learned so much during that time, because there were times when my phone would ring at front of house and it would be Pastor Graham saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. We need to make an adjustment for next service. And as a lighting designer, it was a huge time of growth for me, because what I learned was, in our environment here at Prestonwood, the way that our culture is, turning the lights off is not going to be the way that we're going to express the mode of worship that we want to do, or certainly not the teaching. So learning how to make things look different without just shutting things off, learning how to use shadows to fill them with more light, with color, and that sort of deal. From a lighting design perspective, what we do here is harder. It would be way easier to shut the house lights off, pump all the haze in the room, which we do use haze, but it's in a different way than other places do, and just go with that. But the goal of what we did from an upgrade perspective with all of this, especially the lighting and the scenic, was we want to create an immersive experience for the people. What I hated before was that we had the stage looked like this and the audience looked like this, and there was this virtual wall between the congregation and the stage, which leads to that kind of performance-based feel, which also leads to people in the room sitting back and enjoying the show, and then critiquing it, and then waiting for the pastor to get up and do the real part of what's supposed to be happening. Now we have a much more, people feel in the room because of some lighting we've added and scenic. They feel a part of what's going on.
I do believe that. And that is so important in a room that big with that many people.
It is.
And so we work hard at that. We work, diligently to make sure that it's an atmosphere that people walk in and they say, my goodness, this is a big room, but it doesn't really feel that big. And the lighting can affect that, the atmosphere of the people, evangelism, which we're hugely committed to bringing people to Christ. Evangelism is as much caught as taught, in my view. It's in the atmosphere of the room. It's in the spirit of the people, and obviously the spirit of God.
Yeah. So talking again about evangelism, the purpose of your building being, more than just Sunday mornings. And so many large churches have essentially given up on their Christmas programs, but, the gift of Christmas is still a huge event every year. And so, first of all, Pastor, I apologize for your media czar getting you into a little trouble with your, with the drummer boy video. That was all Brian.
It's not my fault. That was not my fault.
Talk to us.
Comment.
Talk to us, about weighing the cost of, what that requires for your people, and also, monetarily of, doing such a large production every year.
I'll let you go with that, Brian. I'll just briefly say it is something that has become a part of the culture and the community here, the church and the community. I even thought about, having a discussion with our team coming out of COVID, because obviously we didn't do it during COVID. And I think the year after, as we were recovering from COVID, I can't remember exactly what we did. I guess we just missed 1 year.
Just 1 year.
So we just missed 1 year then. But I remember having a conversation about, well, maybe now's the time to shut that down. We've been out a year. It'd be easy to just say it's not coming back. But as we thought about it, prayed about it, it just didn't seem to be the right time to end it. So, we're going to keep it going. It's still effective in reaching people. It's a huge billboard, if you will, for our church. And we do bring a lot of people to Christ through it. There will be people in heaven because of the gift of Christmas, and we think a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because at the end, I share the gospel, and we have ways of bringing people to a place of decision. But there'll be a day, I'm sure, when it's not done. I mean, even the Phantom of the Opera came to an end on Broadway, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes. But right now, Brian, would you say it's an effective tool for us?
I mean, it's such a driving force for those of us even on the technical side of it, because every year the number of decisions that are made, and you can see it live in the room. Pastor gets up and he has everybody light up their phones if they've made a decision, and it's mind-boggling how many lights turn on. Even if only half of those lights were true for real dedications, which I think it's more than that. It's a huge impact.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about the show, we get to do some really cool tech stuff in there. We get to do some mind-blowing production elements. But the thing about that is people are coming into the church to experience that who may not be willing to walk into Prestonwood on a Sunday morning for whatever reason.
True.
Yeah.
I would wager that the vast majority of those people who are making those decisions for Christ didn't pay for their own ticket. It's incredible to see every year when tickets go on sale, how many of our members buy blocks of seats. And I mean,
for their
dozens,
businesses, their neighborhoods. And
they're bringing those people in. They're not asking them to pay for that ticket. And that's the church being the church. We also feed the poor. We also do missions. We do all of those things. But Prestonwood's a cool place because we have the ability to do this with the gift of Christmas. It's part of our DNA. We've been doing it for 30 plus years.
Some form.
Yeah.
Probably 30 years.
It's had different versions of it, but we've been doing it a long time. We've got anywhere from 12 to 1,500 volunteers. Wow. That are in the cast. If you come to the show, everybody you see on stage is either a volunteer or maybe one of the worship staff. So it's just every year it's mind-blowing to see this come together, the technical complexity of it, but then the actual impact it has on people. There are countless stories of people whose lives have been changed, with the gift of Christmas being at least the first step in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. You kind of know the cost going in as far as the manpower, the hours it's going to require, but seeing those phones lit up in a room, like I assume you can't describe the reward that is.
Yeah, when I speaking of the dark, when I do go out, I mean, Brian has nearly killed me a couple of times just getting me on stage and off in the darkness.
Fixed
no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, it's not true, but it's kind of true. But no, it is. I come in total darkness. I mean, the nativity lights up the room, and and it is a different venue. It's an entertainment venue in the sense that you have a stage and you have staging, and the audience is. So when I come out, it's completely dark, and then a spotlight comes on. I share the gospel in about 7 or 8 minutes, and then I invite people to pray to receive Christ. And again, I'm not seeing much. I can see like 3 rows because it's so dark in the room. But then I say, if you pray to receive Christ, take your cell phone, hit your flashlight, and hold it up. And it's a terrifying moment in some ways, because I'm thinking, what if nothing happens here?
Yeah.
Especially the first time or two we did it. What if this is a total bust? And but God always moves in people's hearts. And you'll see one go up, and then there's 2, and then there's 10, and then there's 50, and then there's 100, and then there's a couple of 100, and it's quite a moment.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, guys, we wrap our episodes with something we call a tech takeaway. And for this series with the pastor and production leader, we're kind of asking the same question to both of you, but on opposite sides of the coin. So, Pastor Graham, I'll ask you first. If you were in a room full of church production leaders and could say something to help them better understand their senior pastor, do you have just a word of wisdom, a word of advice to just help production people understand their pastor and the role that they carry?
That's a really great question and an important one. I would say build a relationship with your pastor, and certainly that's on the pastor also to be relational and to do that and not silo those 2 ministries. And I would say really make sure that with all the flash and dash we've got today, which is good even in smaller churches. I mean, you've got tools and technology that no generation before has had. So yet with all the tools and all the technology, all the lights, make sure that the room is ready for God's word. And that your goal is not to make the soloist sound the best, but to make sure that the word of God is clearly heard and understood as best as possible.
Yeah.
That's what I'm all about, is preaching the gospel. And our team does a great job of setting me up so that when I walk into the pulpit, that I have a room that's ready.
Yeah. That's great. Brian, the other side of that coin, if you were in a room filled with senior pastors, that sounds terrifying. What would you want to communicate about them understanding their production people better?
I think I could handle myself in that room. Okay. What's cool about this question is, I don't have to answer this rhetorically, because my answer would be something that I've learned from my relationship with Pastor Graham, which is, number one, pastors, don't assume that your technical people are in opposition to what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
Assume that they might need to be educated on what your vision is, and then take that and invest in your technical team, at least the leader of your technical team, and mentor them in things, because they probably want to know more. They probably want to be here for a long time. And so, my desire is that, pastor would be pouring into me, other members of the senior team would be pouring into me, saying, hey, we're setting you up so that as we move into the future, you're making good decisions based on what we believe Prestonwood is called to do. So look at your technical leaders as people who are going to continue to help usher in the future of the church and pour into them so that they're doing that in a way that goes with your vision of what you believe God has called this church to be.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Blake, I've completely hogged the mic from you this episode. I know most of our listeners have asked me for an episode one time where you didn't say a word, but why don't you thank these men for coming on and wrap us up here, buddy?
Oh, I mean, I've, just been soaking in their wisdom. I got to balance it out with all the nonsense you feed me. But no, we appreciate you guys coming on so much. Is there anything y'all want to plug or point people towards as we wrap the episode?
Well, I would say the Bible in a Year is something that we're doing right now that is new media through Pray.com. And we've seen God just use this. It's a simple thing, really. People want to hear, what does God's word actually say? I mean, read it, and what does it say? So we have a wonderful reader who's got a British voice who does it, and even symphonics and sound effects. If David's charging the giant, you hear him, so there's some really good elements, but I just do an intro and a close, an application. It's all about 13 minutes total. And I remember thinking, if we get a couple of 100,000 people on this, it would be outstanding. We now are nearing 50 million downloads on the Bible in a Year.
Wow.
It's the number one religious broadcast in the world, or rather podcast in the world, and top 20 everything put together. And the nearly 50 million, I'm not just eating humble pie here. 49,500,000 of those don't know who Jack Graham is, or didn't before they got on there, but they saw the Bible in a Year, and people want to know what's in the Bible. What does it actually say? And even Christians have tried to get through the Bible and get Leviticus, in Leviticus and Baal, and so it's helping people get through God's word, both Christians and as well as people who want to know, what does the Bible say? So I would plug that. It's Pray.com, the Bible in a Year.
And that's a podcast? It's on the podcast feed?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this sounds great.
Yes.
Toby might actually read the Bible for once.
It's a good start, Toby. It's a good start.
Yes. Finally.
No, that joke's pretty funny because Toby is actually the good reader, and he makes fun of me for mostly doing audio. So I'm actually really intrigued by this.
Now you can finally listen to the Bible, Blake.
Okay. Brian, anything for you to plug?
Pray.com is the platform. Pray.com, which is one. That's the other thing that they get the credit too for the listeners, because they have such a magnetic platform going on right now.
Yeah.
So we jumped on with them, and it's been amazing.
That's awesome. Brian, anything for you to point people towards?
No, I think that's the driving force. Anything we're doing is more, technical driven and things like that. So.
And the cool thing is too, now the next steps for us and we want to, I'm challenging our church to reach 1 billion people before Christ comes, and it's doable with the technology. We have the world that you all live in.
Yeah.
With technology. And one of the things we're going to do now with the Bible in a Year, we're already getting it in Spanish. And we're talking this morning about Hindi, and there's about 7 or 8 languages that are doable right now through artificial intelligence. And it's my voice. It's the most incredible thing you've ever heard. The AI is able to take my voice and turn it into the languages of the world.
It absolutely sounds like it's him.
Yeah.
Now, those of us who know him know it couldn't possibly be him. But it sounds like Jack Graham saying these things. It is mind-blowing.
Yeah, French, obviously Spanish, Hindi, Farsi. Again, there's German, all these languages. And again, it's not dubbed. It's not a voiceover.
Yeah.
It is my voice speaking the language. We just had a pastor from India here who listened to my version of Hindi. He said it's perfect.
Wow.
I cannot wait to check this out.
It's the day of Pentecost. I'm speaking the languages of the world.
Amazing.
Well, that is quite the vision.
Yeah.
1 billion people before Christ comes back. Well, with this podcast, you hit 2 billion, so we're good to go. I think we hit it. Thank you guys for joining.
Numbers may be a little inflated. I'm not sure.
Nelson hasn't checked it yet. Well, guys, we can't thank y'all enough for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for the privilege. Glad you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, I'm really hoping that the result of this series is that church techs can understand their pastors better and that there will be a, just better line of communication and relationship between them.
Yeah, and if, with the Pay series, you couldn't really send that to your pastor, right? That'd be kind of weird.
It depends on how you do it, and we even talked about that on the Pay series, how to do this, respectfully and not passive-aggressively.
But with this one, you're saying, hey, I just want to get to know you better. So send it to your pastor. Be like, hey, listen to this series with me, and at the end of it, we'll go out and have coffee and talk about our takeaways, any ways we can work better together.
And I sent it to my pastor, and all he said was, fire Blake.